Hi, I'm Mark Robertson, and I would like to welcome you to my YouTube channel, simply called Mark Robertson Talks. I will be giving regular talks on a wide range of issues. Anything from today's topic, prayer in school, and how I think it was an abomination and unconstitutional that prayer was removed from school, to other topics related to school, politics, issues of the day, some historical context, things like that, and health, a number of things. And I don't even 100% know what direction it will head, but we'll be talking about a lot of subjects and hope you'll tune in and like the channel, and we will go from there to see what happens. But like I said, today's topic is prayer in school. I think that's one of the worst moments in U.S. history when prayer was taken out of school. It was totally unconstitutional. 170 years before 1962, when that happened, there was prayer in school. Nobody thought anything about it. There was no court precedents for taking prayer out of school. There was nothing in the Constitution. And as a matter of fact, the Constitution defended, in the very First Amendment, in the very first words of the First Amendment, defended prayer and the free exercise of religion. And that includes schools, and that includes public schools. The founders guaranteed that. The First Amendment guarantees a child's right to voluntary prayer, the right and to write about prayer and God and speak about their religious beliefs and read the Bible and recite out of the Bible out loud in front of other students. There is nothing in the Constitution that forbids that. But along comes 1962, and some zealots who hate God, who are totalitarian in their beliefs, like all totalitarians. They got to get rid of God and brainwash the kids. So a case came along called Engel versus Vital. And the number of cases would come after that. But any challenge to prayer in school had been shot down in lower courts. And Engel versus Vital happened in the state of New York. And it was very simple. It was like the camel getting its nose into the tent. They wanted to stop a daily prayer in public schools in the state of New York. It was a very simple prayer, harmless. Of course it's harmless. I mean, my gosh, I'll read you that prayer to show you how harmful, and oh my gosh, can't have the kids do this. Here it is, very simple. At the beginning of each day, and kids weren't even forced to do it. It was a voluntary prayer. Almighty God, we acknowledge our dependence upon Thee, and we beg Thy blessings upon us, our parents, our teachers, and our country. Amen. Oh my gosh, these kids were, their brains were warped by this, no doubt. They had to take this out of schools. Of course, they used the excuse taxation. They said it's not fair that our tax dollars go towards schools that have something in those schools that we don't support. And I guess everything else is off limits. But like I said, many courts had ruled that prayer was totally fine in schools, including the New York Supreme Court. And here what they said in the majority ruling. Not only is prayer not a violation of the First Amendment, in parentheses, no decision of this or the United States Supreme Court says or suggests that it is, in parentheses, but a holding that it is such a violation would be in defiance of all American history, and such a holding would destroy a part of our essential foundation of the American governmental structure. That the First Amendment was ever intended to forbid an establishment of religion, a simple declaration of belief in God, is so contrary to history as it to be impossible of acceptance. Well, that was pretty cut and dried, but not to our Supreme Court. The Supreme Court of this country has been so harmful in so many ways. Of course, Roe v. Wade, Dred Scott, Obergefell, and many other bad decisions. You got 9 people in robes can control everything. Decisions should be left to the states, first of all, on that and other decisions. If the state would vote to take prayer out of school, well, that would be constitutional. But it can't be done on a federal basis anyway. That's a whole nother issue. But this had nothing to do with taxation. It was all about, like I said, control and power, and they wanted to get prayer out of schools. The ACLU is not good. Went to the Supreme Court, and believe it or not, the Supreme Court allowed for it in a 6-1 ruling that they said the Engel was right. Prayer had to be taken out of schools. It was unfair that people's taxes would be used for that. That was a sham excuse. But only one justice voted against it, Potter Stewart. He pointed out that, like I say, 170 years history, it had never been done, and it was totally unconstitutional. And the establishment clause used by the ACLU and the rest, they use this letter from Thomas Jefferson, a famous letter that he sent to the Danbury Baptist Association, where he talked about a wall of separation. But they totally misinterpret that, and that doesn't have anything to do with the Constitution anyway. Jefferson wasn't even at the Constitutional Convention, and he wrote this was a private letter. There's nothing in the Constitution that talks about the separation of church and state. And in the letter anyway, what Jefferson was saying is that the government couldn't infringe upon religion. And so it was wrong anyway, but you can't use something like that for a Supreme Court decision, a private letter. Like I say, Jefferson wasn't even at the Constitutional Convention. He was in France. He was an ambassador to France at that point. But this has since been used by bad Supreme Court justices, even as late in the 1940s, in the case Everson versus Board of Education. It was upheld, but the justices, such as Hugo Black, said this does not cross the line of separation of church and state. Well, there is no line. It's crazy. So they kind of take that for granted that there is a separation of church and state in the Constitution. It's not even there. And it's crazy how they use that. It's a letter. It's a total fraud. They're either lying or ignorant or both. And Jefferson, of course, the author of the Declaration of Independence, pointed out that God, the Creator, is the source of our rights, unalienable rights, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. And so it's a right. We have a right to pray in school or anywhere else. And the dissenter, Potter Stewart, of course, said this is not an establishment of religion at all. It's a joke. And that basically said the United States cannot establish religion. And prayer and Bible reading and been a part of public schools, like I say, for nearly 2 centuries. And the Northwest Ordinance, this was a charter for the area west of the Appalachian and mountains. And they, in there, they talked about teaching morality to young people and in education in schools, in public schools. And here's what the Northwest Ordinance said: religion, morality, knowledge being a necessary to good government and happiness of mankind, schools and the means of education shall forever be encouraged. And this included teaching out of the Bible. The Bible was a major textbook in schools up until even this century, and it was a major part of it. And like I say, the Northwest Ordinance knew that the Bible was the foundation, basically, of this country. The founders quoted the Bible all the time and definitely used it in putting the Constitution together. And the free exercise of religion. What is that? Oh my gosh, the Supreme Court. The 10 Commandments are displayed in the Supreme Court. The House and Senate open each day with a prayer. The President of the United States is sworn in on the Bible. And from George Washington onward, the last line of the oath for the President is, "So help me God." And of course, on our money, in God we trust. So what is this taking out of prayer out of schools? Had a number of secondary effects. They couldn't teach honestly about the Pilgrims, because the Pilgrims, what is the word pilgrim? That is religious. They believed in God and how they trusted in God to come to this country. And the Mayflower Compact, and all this. God was the foundation. So they really couldn't teach honestly. So not only does it take prayer out of school, it destroys the truth in a lot of our foundation and our educational past, even teaching the Constitution, like I said. We are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights. Our Creator is God, so they can't really teach that. So it not only took prayer out, but it had a lot of other harmful effects. And atheism actually is a religion. And so you don't take religion out of schools just because you take Christian prayer out of schools. You put a new religion in. And of course, another case that came along, Madeline Murray, eventually O'Hare, she's a founder of American Atheists. She had a suit against the Baltimore School District. She didn't like the fact that her son had to read from the Bible quite often in school. And this went to the Supreme Court too, and they voted in favor of Madeline Murray O'Hare, 8-1. Again, Potter Stewart was the one dissenter, and saying that like I said, secularism is a religion. Separation of church and state is not in the Constitution. And they are teaching religion. I mean, look at what do we base right and wrong on? So you have to base it on something. So what is it now? It's just kind of the whims of the day. Look at our public schools. They're teaching that a child can change their sex. That's insane. Transgenderism overall is a fraud. Dr. Paul McHugh of Johns Hopkins, the head of psychiatry there in the past, he's retired now, but pointed out many studies on how it's just a fraud, it's a mental disorder, and it's total child abuse, this transgenderism and boys using girls' restrooms and all that. Look to where we've come. They're giving out birth control in schools. The sex education basically is a pushing of sexual activity. They want to get the kids sexually active, actually. There's a force that wants to do that. They teach all this perversion to kids as young as kindergarten or who knows, maybe even earlier than that. And our schools are out of control. And it all started when they took God out of the schools, right and wrong. There's nothing to base it on, the Bible. And these people, these forces, these evil forces, they hate the Bible. They want to get it out of school, so they use some excuse like taxation. That hadn't anything to do with it. And John Dewey basically brought public education to this country from Prussia. And in Prussia, it was thought that education should be indoctrination of children. And that's what public education is here in this country. It's such indoctrination. So you've taken Christian religion out of school, but they have a religion, like I said, secular humanism. Anything goes. And these wild-eyed people behind this insanity, sex education, and all the other this, rewriting history, and all of this other stuff have just gone down the hill since God was taken out of school. And like I say, it's really an abomination. I really don't know what the answer is for public schools. It's crazy. There's vouchers. They have to have some competition. They need at least vouchers to start. But I'm not sure that our country will survive if public education keeps going in the direction it is. So many ignorant kids don't know anything about the founding of the country, don't know anything about right and wrong. People who are Christians are made fun of, and people who try to live Christian morality are made fun of. They push the opposite of that in many schools. And then you get to the colleges, campuses, and it's even worse. It's crazy. It's off the wall there. And it's all started with taking God out of public schools. And it was just a horrendous decision. It was a turning point in U.S. history. Things on every measurable way have gotten worse since that point. Teenage pregnancy, STDs. When I understand there were only like 2 STDs back then. Now they're over 30. It's crazy. It's out of control. Nothing's right. Nothing's wrong. If it feels good, do it. The total fraud called safe sex. It's crazy. And the sex education is out of control. They push these kids to get sexually active. Planned Parenthood is behind it. You wonder why. They're in the abortion industry, so they provide them with more opportunities to perform abortions. It's a follow the money as well. And, I mentioned that the separation of church and state was not in the Constitution. And the founders never meant it to be. It's also another lie that they were mostly deists. They were mostly Christians, and mostly active Christians, and who put together the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson. And the people don't know this, but you hear all these things about taking the 10 Commandments out of courthouses or in other public settings. Like I mentioned, the 10 Commandments are depicted in the Supreme Court, so you would think that would be constitutional, obviously. But the U.S. Capitol was once the largest church in the eastern United States. Yes, you heard me right, the Capitol building. They would have Christian religious services there. And the author of the Declaration of Independence and the father of the Constitution, Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, would regularly attend services there. So if anyone knew what was constitutional, it would be them. And they had no problem with even having religious services in the U.S. Capitol building. And but like I say, our country has evolved in a bad way. Religion is a threat to totalitarians everywhere. They try to shut it down in the Soviet Union and China, and they are about brainwashing children as well. They can't have them believing in God. They got to believe in the state, the almighty state, trust in the state and the almighty supreme rulers. And it's also, they talk about equality. They want to give all religions equal share, and since they can't do that, they take them all out. But well, they don't actually do that because, like I said, they put secular humanism in there. But there's nothing about equality anyway. Christianity was taught in public schools from the beginning of the country, and there's nothing says that Buddhism or Hinduism also has to be taught. And it's crazy. There's nothing in the Constitution that requires equality. And so it's all a fraud. Taking prayer out of school was a total sham. It's a total lie. And it was the beginning, or one of the beginnings, of the downward spiral in this country in morality. And now we have something called same-sex marriage. We have all kinds of other depravity out there. And the family that is under attack. The mom and dad, male and female, under attack. And Christian morality is under attack. And it's all about controlling our lives, and it's all about power and control. And I got a lot of my information for all this in the book Dark Agenda, and it's written by David Horowitz. He's got another good book out about the upcoming election and what's going on there as well. But he's great. His books are wonderful. He's a great author. He was once part of the far left, and his parents were basically communist. And he saw the light, and now he's one of the greatest defenders of freedom in the country. And in the chapter on prayer in school, there's actually a couple chapters on it, he ends it by asking this question: how did the First Amendment guarantee of religious freedom change overnight into a suppression of that same freedom? A circus put on by a calculating, truth-challenged, anti-American crackpot, egged on by the ACLU, radicals, provided an opportunity for 8 lifetime political appointees, elected by no one and accountable to no one, to reinterpret the Constitution, overturn nearly 2 centuries of precedent and tradition, and change the life of a nation. That basically describes what happened. It was unconstitutional. It was nothing short of an attack on our country from within. And taking prayer out of public schools has been nothing but a disaster. And it's brought great harm to kids, great confusion to kids, and it has greatly harmed them the most. It has harmed our country overall, but now so many kids are confused. There has to be a right and wrong, something to base that on. Now there's nothing there. It's just the whims of these secular humanists. Anything goes. And they teach some of the craziest things in schools, public schools these days. But who can criticize them? And if you criticize them, you get called racist, bigot, other things. And it doesn't even make any sense, first of all. But it's crazy. They've got all these attacks set up that if you dare criticize their agenda or the direction you're heading, you're the extremist and you're the nutcase. And they got the language down too. Like I say, they got all their semantics in proper order so that the leftist news media will cooperate with them and actually treat transgenderism of young kids as a real thing. It's a total fraud. It's total child abuse. And it's one of the many bad results of taking prayer out of school and the overall direction and moral decay of this country. And ironically, the sexual revolution, which has been a total disaster, started at that time as well in the early 60s. And look where we are today with all the rampant STDs and things like this. And people don't know what right and wrong is or what to base right and wrong on. And that little court decision, or a number of court decisions, headed this country in the wrong direction. And I thank you today for tuning in to my first episode, I guess is what you call it, of my new YouTube channel called Mark Robertson Talks. And look forward to seeing you in the near future. We'll be here on a regular basis, and hopefully you found this interesting, and you will the next ones as well. So until the next time, take care.